we are introducing and walking through how to process and generate an ACH file, ACH payment through Business Central. So I'll start off by walking through a couple configuration and setups that are involved, including configuring your data exchange definition. So your exchange definition is essentially setting up and configuring a file that can meet the requirements of your specific bank for your ACH file. We'll go through setting up your bank export code. That code will be configured and then attached to your bank account in Business Central to drive that generation of your ACH file. And then there are a couple important fields within your bank account, which I'll walk through as well. And then lastly, the setup is to set up your vendor's bank account information. So we'll go through that very quickly as well. And then we'll go ahead and end off actually populating your payment journal and generating your remittance and ACH file. So to start off, we want to first, and I'll go ahead and just search and navigate to my list of data exchange definitions. And so we have one here for our ACH. In our demo company, it's just called US EFT default. But I'll go ahead and drill into this exchange definition. And before I get any further within this data exchange definition, this is built off of your ACH file requirements that you, if you do choose to use and generate ACH files through BC, you'll need to reach out to your bank for those ACH file requirements. And so let me switch over to this page here. This is just an example that anyone can find on the web. So this specifically, we're looking at Chase Bank. This is an example of a file that you can reach out to your bank for as far as getting those specific ACH file requirements from the bank. So if we scroll through, your ACH file is going to, most standard files would typically contain headers. So your first couple lines are your file header, your batch header. Files will also contain an entry detail record, as well as a couple control records, which are basically just your footer records, right? And so if I scroll down to the specific requirements that we've gotten from Chase Bank here, you'll see your first couple lines of your ACH file will be your header records. And so if we take a look at this first requirement here, so field number 1 should consist of your record type code, which is a constant of 1, right? So once you specify these requirements, we can set up those requirements back in our data exchange definition within Business Central. So if we take a look at the line definition here, if we take a look at the first line that we have configured, which is our first header, and then take a look at your column definitions below, you can see column number 1. If we go back really quick to our Chase requirements, column number 1 should be your record type, which should be a constant code of 1. And so if we go back to BC, you can see I've detailed column 1. Column 1 is called your record type. And then you can see I've detailed here a constant of 1. And so I won't get into too much detail of fully configuring your data exchange definition, but the idea is to, step number 1, receive those ACH file requirements from your bank, follow step by step or column by column each requirement from the bank, and configure that within your data exchange definition within Business Central. And so our sample ACH file here is going to consist of 2 headers, 1 detailed record, and 2 footer or control records. So that's your data exchange definition. Once you have that definition configured to fit your bank's ACH file requirements, the next step here is to configure what we call a bank export. And essentially all you're doing here is you're just simply setting up a code. And so the code that I have here for our example is this US EFT default code. A couple of things that you just have to specify, and for all ACH, the direction should be set to export-EFT. You have a couple other options, but specifically what we're looking at here is for our ACH files that will need to be export-EFT. You do need to specify your processing code unit, and for ACH again, that will always be code unit ID 10320. Lastly, within your bank export code that you've created, you then want to then come over to this column here to assign that data exchange definition that we walked through prior to coming into this page here. Now, once this code is finally created, the last step is to assign this code to your actual bank account. And so if I navigate over to my list of bank accounts, and I'll go ahead and drill into my checking account. Within your bank account card, if you scroll down into your transfer tab, there is a specific field here called payment export format. And so that data exchange definition and then that bank export code that we set up, you then want to come into your bank account and make sure that we have that code attached to the specific bank account that you're going to be processing and generating this ACH file for. A couple other things as far as setup goes within your bank account card that I do want to point out here is when generating your ACH file, you will need to generate a remittance advice prior to generating and downloading that ACH file. And just pointing out this field here, your last remittance advice number, this is simply just an incrementing number. I always like to put in an alphanumeric code here. So every remittance that is generated, this number here will just increment. And then the last thing to point out here, you will need to specify your country export format. For us, it would be US. So you have a couple other options here as well. And then lastly, your ePay export file name. So this is just going to be the file name of that ACH file that is generated out of Business Central. So again, I've just done an alphanumeric code here, and typically that ACH file is generated into a text formatted file. Okay. Now, before we actually get into populating our payment journal and generating that ACH file, the very last setup that you need to consider is setting up your vendor's bank account information. So I'll navigate over to my vendor list here, and let's just take a look at Fabricam, for example. So if I open up the vendor card for Fabricam, and in the ribbon, if I go to vendor and bank accounts, this is where we would be able to navigate to set up the vendor's bank account information. So you can see for Fabricam, we already have a couple bank accounts set up. If you wanted to create a new one, you would simply just hit plus new. But let's just take a look at this ECA bank that's already been created. And so it's fairly straightforward when setting up the vendor's bank account info. Just give that bank a code, name. It's optional. You can populate the vendor bank account's address and contact information if you want to. Really, the only essential information that you will need to populate in order to generate an ACH file is your vendor's bank account number and routing number here. And then lastly, in order to generate an ACH with this vendor's bank account, you just need to make sure that you have this Boolean field toggled on, so used for electronic payments. If for whatever reason this setting is off, if you tried to generate and post an ACH payment through BC, you'll receive an error. So just make sure that this Boolean is toggled on. Okay. So once all of that is set up, we are now ready to actually populate our payment journal and generate an ACH file. So before I get into the payment journal, again, just a really quick recap. Step number one is to configure your data exchange definition based off of those file requirements that you receive from the bank. Step number two is to configure your bank export code. Attach that data exchange definition to your bank export code. And lastly, attach that bank export code to your bank account card. And then, of course, step four, or your last step essentially, is to configure your vendor bank accounts information as well. So now let's go ahead and navigate over to our payment journal. So our payment journal is where we would typically go to populate, process, and post all vendor payments. So your payment journal should look fairly familiar. Of course, you have your batch name within your journal. I always like to create batches based on your method of payment. And so you can see here we have a couple of different batches representing check payments, cash, ACH, and so on. So I'll stay within my, my ACH batch here. And let me just post this so that we have a clean journal to work from. Okay, so populating your payment journal is pretty straightforward. It's essentially the same process regardless of what kind of payment method you're going with, whether it's check, ACH, or just a manual payment. So we'll quickly go through populating a payment journal line here. So I'll populate my posting and document date. Your document type will always autofill in with payment. And then of course you have a doc number here that's auto populating, but you can always manually update this document number if you need to. When filling out your payment journal, your account type should typically be your vendor, and then we can go ahead and select, let's do Fabricam as our vendor that we are populating this ACH payment for. You can see the recipient bank account auto-populates with that ECA bank that we just configured within the vendor. If there were multiple vendor bank accounts, you could always drop this field down and select the specific bank account for this ACH payment. Your payment method, this is purely just informational. So you can see for Fabricam, it's defaulted to check, but since we are processing an ACH payment, I'll go ahead and just change that payment method to ACH. And we'll leave the amount blank for now. The reason for this is once we select the invoice that's being paid, that amount will auto-populate for us. And then your balance account type. This should typically be set to your bank account, and your balance account number should be the bank account that you are issuing this ACH payment from. So in this case, we'll select our checking account, and then I will go ahead and under the applies to document number, I'll go ahead and drill into that field to select the invoice that we want to pay. So I'll select this one here of about 15,000. So we'll go with that one. Now you'll notice that the invoice number will populate here once you select it. And if we go back to that amount field, you can see it auto-populates with the full invoice amount that we are applying this payment to. Now, The last step here, and probably the most important, is your bank payment type. So depending on what type of payment we are processing, if we are cutting and printing a check, for example, that would be computer check. If we are just recording a manual payment, that would be your manual check option. For today, because we want to generate that ACH file, you want to make sure that your bank payment type is specified as electronic payment. If you try to generate and download an ACH file without having the correct bank payment type, BC will shoot you an error and won't let you move forward. Okay, and so at this point, your payment line is populated and you are ready to generate your remittance advice, as well as generate and download your ACH file. And so once your payment line is fully populated, if you go into the top ribbon and select bank and export, we can first export out our remittance. And so just verify that your bank account information is correct. If you wanted multiple copies for any reason, you could specify the number of copies that you want. And then you can specify your output method as well. So if I hit the drop down, we have a few options here. So I'll just leave it as PDF, and then I'll go ahead and hit OK to download our remittance advice. And so if I open that up, a pretty standard, straightforward remittance advice. You'll see your vendor information here. You can see the deposit amount that will be hitting the vendor's bank account. And then, of course, the vendor's bank information, so their routing number and their bank account number. And then down in the lines below, you'll see your specific invoice details that are being paid through this ACH file. And so what you can do is you can save this remittance advice and email it out to the vendor simply for payment confirmation. Okay. And lastly, we can now go ahead and generate our ACH file. So again, it's in the ribbon, go to Actions, Functions, and Generate EFT file. And you will see your one line with the one payment journal line that we just populated. You can see the document number and then the amount that is being paid within this ACH file. And so just make sure that it's checkmarked to include it within the ACH file. And all we do now is hit Generate EFT. And BC will generate and download this ACH file here. So let me just show you what that looks like really quickly. Okay, and so this is your ACH file. So it looks fairly complicated, but if we break it down based off of those file requirements again, so let me just show you the requirements from Chase Bank. So you can see a file header and a batch header. So if we open up the ACH file, you can see this first line is your file header, containing information such as your bank account number. You can see the bank name, your company name. So our demo company is called Cronus. You can see the batch header in the second line containing some additional essential information. Your detailed record is going to contain information such as the payment amount, the vendor that we're paying, the vendor number as well. And then you can see, lastly, it ends with our two footer records here. And so once you've generated this file, you can then take this file and simply upload it into your bank portal. And that file, once uploaded to the bank, will initiate and drive that ACH payment to the vendor's bank account.